about. This time of the year, we call it Indian season, soccer. Hits our scenes, hits our communities. Easter tournament is one of the biggest gatherings of soccer. And of course, it's so annual, it's in our blood. But when it doesn't happen, what now? There's a big vacuum that seems to be there. Anxiety set in. I should be out practicing. What if it's, So anyway, all those become sort of contributory factors that we engage in. And when you don't know, you start to make up things. And then sometimes you withdraw. And therein lies some of the symptoms of anxiety that feeds itself. So in saying that, trying to understand that, of course, spirituality then comes into my life. And this is where I start to believe and re-believe. So in saying that right now, I just want to thank the Creator once again for this wonderful day that's been given us. I want to thank the Creator for teaching us to respect all of creation. And keeping in mind, I want to thank all the traditional territories that we're calling from. In my case right now, the Lakwanan nations here in Victoria. And I'm originally, of course, I'm from, as a chief of Zaudeno First Nations. I'm a senior advisor to SPARC. And so I just wanted to say that we want to acknowledge our families, our children, and our communities, that is truly a value that we have, and that we're reminded that we are never, ever alone, and it's so special. But at the same time, we want to ask the Creator to be with us as we gather strength for us to look after ourselves, knowing that there's a lot of grief happening out there, tragedies happening out there, and many, many unknowns happening out there, and that have created a lot of major questions. And but at the same time, the belief is that the Creator also is there to give us that hope, and for us that there'll be a better moments, there'll be better days. And we ask the Creator to be with us, to give us strength, wisdom, and guidance this evening, and for us to use that to accompany us as we get into our evening. And I just want to honor SPARC and thank SPARC and the communities and all the organizations that are going to be helping with this presentation. It's much needed, it's very timely, and we know that you take in whatever you can from this as information, you digest it as best you can and put it to work. And it's your responsibility after this is to put it to work and make it work. Thank you very much. Back to you, organizers.
Thank you, Alex. Thank you so much. Should I take it from here?
Yeah, please lead the session.
Okay, excellent. Well, thank you. That really fills my heart hearing Alex's soothing words and voice. And I am coming to you from the unceded territory, traditional territory of the Syilx Nation in the Okanagan Valley tonight. So hello to everyone. I know we probably have people from all over, which is really exciting. And I know we may potentially have some youth, we may have some parents, we may have some coaches, we may have some community leaders and recreation leaders. So it's a tall order to think about how am I going to present to all those groups? They're also different. So whatever you take, like Alex said, whatever you take, that little nugget that makes sense to you of what you're feeling right now and the role that you play, hopefully there will be some things that you will be able to identify and be able to move forward with tonight as tools. So the purpose, to just remember how we check in. I know everyone, with all of the great tools that SPARC has had across the different communities, sending out their feedback tools and many communities saying the population they're most worried about is the youth right now, and the toll that this is taking on our youth from being separated and not having the sense of normalcy for so long, especially since sport is such an important part of binding communities and families for so many of us. So understanding that and knowing that you might be seeing anxiety in your youth and in yourself these days, and introducing the concept of flexibility or agility. Some people like to call it emotional agility, mental agility, and what that could look like, and some ideas to build a plan if you see some of those concerns happening in your youth or on your team, if you're a coach or if you're a parent. How do I know what is normal and when I need to start thinking about getting extra supports, and what could I do? So we know that we have folks from all over, and we want to think locally in community. What we're doing, wherever you're coming from, it might look different for all of you. So the smiling faces of these youth here going off to NAG and representing Team BC and all those beautiful memories that have been made, and ones that we will surely make in the future, but that we have not had the opportunity to make this year, at least not the same way. So to start, we need to talk about what anxiety is, and maybe have a better understanding of why it's there and what it might mean for you. So we know that every single human being is very unique and amazing, and no two athletes that I have ever met are completely alike, and that includes twins. So we know that everyone has their uniqueness, and everyone has different tools that they have to work with based on family, background, community, all of these things. So building some flexibility into their toolkit means I'm really careful. I don't use as much the term of making youth more mentally tough anymore. I used those words a lot in the past, but now I tend to use mental flexibility instead, because I found that the flexibility was a word that resonated with them a bit better, because the opposite of mental toughness is mental weakness. And we don't want any of our youth to think that, oh, well, if I'm not being mentally tough, my coach says I need to be mentally tougher, it must mean that I'm weak. And that is not where we want them to feel they need to be. So where we want to start, and I've mentioned this in the past with some of the presentations that I have done for SPARC, I really want to make sure that we talk about or share ideas of how we can get youth to check in with themselves, but also to check in with us. So it could be the parent checking in with them. It could be the youth checking in with each other. It could be the coach checking in with their athletes, whatever that looks like. And so how does that check-in work? Well, everybody's really different. So some coaches have told me, oh, we have a weekly Zoom, or we have a WhatsApp group that we have on the phone. Or for some that are fortunate enough to maybe have the ability to meet, although that is very limited these days, or they might have a bubble that they're allowed to do, they make sure that they include a mental check-in, just a mental health check-in of how everybody's feeling in that. So the step one is, we can't know if someone's anxious or experiencing anxiety or is challenged in any way if we haven't built a time to talk about it and to make that normal and okay that we talk about that. So that's number one. We know that we are experiencing, so right now, just starting in March, we've just gotten into, we're on the back end of the winter. We are hitting our surge capacity. And I actually talked about this last month. If some of you tuned into the webinar last month, surge capacity, think of it like those electronics you plug in and they have that surge protector that helps if there's an electrical storm so everything doesn't short out. Well, we're all feeling some of this surge capacity right now. So to know that we're not alone and to let youth know that they're not alone is really important. Like, we're all feeling pretty maxed out in a lot of different ways. Many of the youth that I'm working with, largely virtually right now, are saying like, I don't feel normal. I don't even know what normal feels anymore. I'm frustrated. I'm feeling sort of low grade tension. And I don't know what to do with it. And I don't know, is this normal? Well, one thing that we know from looking at all the different lines of work for those of us that work in helping professions, with what we are all going through as communities right now, it is probably fairly normal that we don't feel normal right now. And everybody's going to be managing these levels of stress differently. And so we have to have really individual approaches to how we assess each of our youth, because you might even have a household where there's multiple kids, multiple teens, and each of them are acting differently. So talk a little bit about what that might look like. One tool that I use is this battery check idea, and a lot of kids today, because they know electronics so well, it's an image that they understand. This idea of the battery, how's your battery doing? And even the youngest little ones can figure that out because they're used to looking at battery life on their games or on their phones or iPads and all those things. And so maybe you can come up with a little chart. So if you're a parent in your home, you can have a chart of your battery. How's that battery feeling today? Is it up in purple? It's totally full. It's near the plus sign, or it's starting to go down into the pink zone, working your way through. You can come up with your own color codes, going from great, okay, struggling, pretty good, or good, meh, wherever those are as they're going down, and use language that they'll understand. So based on their age, based on their language, what would be the best way to talk about the battery life? And when they get into the different levels of battery, what are the different ways that we can do to help cope in that moment? So you'll see this particular side or this image has, maybe you can do something, that one thing to make yourself feel better today. Or maybe for the older athletes, giving them an idea of what self-care means. What could they do to take some good self-care time today, and brainstorming that with you. So the battery check is one strategy that seems to work really well with this generation. We got to meet them where they are, right? They're an electronic generation, many of them. So looking at different ways to combine our past and our wisdom with the tools that they are used to. Another one that I introduced a few times on the webinars that I have been helping SPARC to deliver, I also talk about the traffic light, or talking about the zones, a color zone of the traffic light. So having different zones like the stop zone, the challenge zone, and the comfort zone. The comfort zone's like it sounds, feeling pretty good, not really too much tweak, I'm feeling okay. But we get in the challenge zone, now the frustrations, more anxiety is there, difficulty sleeping maybe, more worries. So putting some words to what each of those zones talk like or look like. And for coaches working with teams, there are some tools that I've also distributed to SPARC to give some language to the athletes of what these zones might look like, so that we can monitor it. And then when we're in those different zones, what we can do to help cope in them, or maybe move us, if possible, from one zone to the other. Sometimes you simply have to rest it out, and you have to wait it out for that zone to flow. And other times they might need additional support. So we're going to talk about what that support might be and when we should start intervening. So as mental health practitioners, we use this chart. It's a continuum. It's a little bit like a rainbow also. And you'll see it goes along horizontally. So our green zone is when we have an athlete or a client who is fairly normally functioning. And then they might get into the yellow zone of reacting. So that daily stressors that we face as humans, and it's reversible. Generally, it just kind of cycles through those two in times where you're not facing some significant disturbances. Where we get into the injured and the ill end of the continuum is where we have significant impairments. So this might be things like they have not slept a good night's sleep in weeks, or it could be no appetite, or unusually high appetite and binging. Or it could be other forms of upset and impairment that is really affecting their daily functioning. And the further we go towards the red, the more we're in that zone where we know that we might have to see if we can get additional help. So helping to give youth a language, whether it's the battery, whether it's the stoplight, whether it's taking a look at, for the older athletes online, you can see there are actually quite a few resources geared to youth. If you just put mental health continuum, you will see it will give a language and give some strategies of where you might want to think about drawing this line of when is it regular anxiety that's to be expected, and when are we maybe getting into something where we need to get them additional support. And so that I invite you to look, and I can also send some good links to SPARC so that we can have them available to everybody that is on the call here today to help you. We know that when we're in that red zone, the red zone is the one we're really concerned about, although orange also will tend to require additional support too. But it's really a low mood that would last for a week or more, and just the daily self-care is not there. So, not getting up, not wanting to shower, not just not going through the daily activities. The symptoms of anxiety might be disordered eating, might be obsessions or compulsions that are more than usual. So we may have had someone who's already been diagnosed with some mental health challenges, and now in addition, we see some other challenges for which they have not been assessed or treated, and we might want to look into that too. Insomnia, panic attacks are becoming more regular. I have heard more often now of more and more athletes who are experiencing panic attacks, sometimes for the first time in their life. So they haven't had one before. And their worries and concerns over, will this ever end? Why, how long is this going to go? I miss my friends. I miss my sport. And bringing on these episodes of panic and gloom and a lack of hope, because sport has been used as such an important community bonder and coping tool for so many youth, wanting to make sure that we can give them some of that hope back, and that will help. So that's when we get into the coping strategies. I'll talk about that a bit later. And then the last one, of course, if we're seeing like ongoing hopelessness, any self-harm and suicidal thoughts, this is where we definitely want to reach out for emergency assistance. And I will go through some of those steps at the end too, so that we can build a plan to support our youth in every family and in every team. So what is anxiety? Does everyone get it? Yes. Everybody gets it. In fact, it's a necessary and sometimes helpful thing. Doesn't sound very helpful to be nervous or fearful, but it's a certain amount of, you could say that it's your early warning system, that sometimes it goes a little overboard in some people's cases, but it helps us prepare for challenging situations. And our brains are always detecting threats, because we're like every other mammal and part of the natural world. We are part of that natural world, and anxiety is a part of it to keep us alive. However, sometimes those feelings or those sensations malfunction, and they end up impairing our physical and mental health. So this is where we might have some excessive anxiety and be breaking into ground where we might need additional supports. So what I get often with the youth, or also with coaches, parents, how do we know that what our youth are experiencing, that level of anxiety is quote unquote normal? When do we know if we need to try new strategies, or if they need new tools, they need to talk to someone, maybe a professional? So everyone has a certain amount of worry and stress and sleepless nights, etc. And everybody's going through challenging times right now. But there are a couple things in particular, in addition to the symptoms and how severe they are, that you might want to be thinking about when you're trying to assess what anxiety might look like, or anxiousness. And those are, so in addition to the different, how many symptoms you're seeing, it's the duration. So how long have they had these symptoms? So if it's a couple days, or it's been, because of a particular situation, it's been surrounding that one situation, which has now passed and it's started to subside, that we might not be as concerned. But if it's going on several weeks to months, duration might be something you want to keep your eye on. The second one is the level of impairment. So how much they can or can't function, as I mentioned before, sort of those daily activities. So now I'm noticing, wow, I was really starting to dip. At first I thought this was going to pass, but now I'm noticing, my athlete or my child or my teen, this has been going on a really long time. I wonder if we need some additional coping strategies or tools, or to talk to someone and get additional support. So those two things, and so for the youth that are watching this, think about how long you've been feeling this way, and also how much this is affecting your daily, just the daily stuff that you used to be able to do no problem. Like getting up, brushing your teeth, getting yourself ready for the day, how you're sleeping, things like that. So how is that affecting you right now? So those two things. And we know that in another way that we can look when we're in the red zone, and in that red zone on the horizontal continuum of mental health, we know that there are different types of anxiety that people generally need additional support for. And these are some of them on here that perhaps you or someone you love may have experienced before. So the generalized anxiety is that very excessive and persistent, so almost nonstop worry that impacts daily functioning. And they almost have trouble putting those feelings away. It's always present feeling of anxiety. Okay. The second one are panic attacks in panic disorder that may come cascading one after the other, or an overwhelming, like it says here, an overwhelming combination of psychological and physical distress. And this can come from trauma. This can come from particular situations that they are currently experiencing, or from the past, and exacerbated by, and some of these things might coexist with other conditions too. So panic disorder. And then the last two, the OCD, or obsessive compulsive disorder, where these thoughts or ideas that are going over and over again in their head, and compulsions, so behaviors that they're doing over and over and over, are another way that anxiety manifests. The last one, phobias, would be if you see that your child or teen or youth are starting to become persistently fearful of one specific thing, type of activity, or just a general situation that ordinarily isn't particularly harmful. So they've started to fixate on that one thing. And we have been seeing more and more, because of COVID-19 and the emphasis on mask wearing, on germs, and perception of hand washing and cleanliness, some phobic activities or behaviors are being seen more often. So just things to keep top of mind and to be monitoring. And again, just keeping the conversation going. If you're the parent, or you're the coach, or you're the community leader, knowing a little bit about what some of these types of anxiety disorders look like might be a clue towards you helping to move someone towards getting some help for them. So because these are beyond regular function, general daily functioning, and the typical anxiety that we would see in someone. like I said, all athletes need to have a certain amount of anxiety because all of us have a nervous system, and athletes tend to focus on their voluntary nervous system. And all that means is that nervous system that they feel in charge of. So the voluntary control are things like our muscles. And athletes, you can talk muscles with them because that's something they understand when they're working out and they're doing weights, they're doing cardiovascular exercise. They understand that nervous system because they have a direct connection to it as athletes. That's the one where athletes typically focus. Where they don't focus is the place where anxiety can really have an impact. And that's on the autonomic nervous system. Throwing a bunch of big words at you tonight, but all you really need to know, what I do for athletes to pare it down to a way that they can really understand, is thinking about driving a car. And if you're driving a car, what are the things that are really the two systems that really need to drive that car? Number one is you need an accelerator because you need to put your foot on the pedal. You need the gas, right? And the sympathetic nervous system helps with that fight or flight response, or things like sweating and you feel your heart rate going up and blood pressure going up. And of course, for a car, you're going to need the brakes, right? So that rest and digest system, it lowers our heart rate and relaxes all the sphincter muscles so that we can hopefully keep that accelerator under control. Where things get out of control for athletes is when that nervous system delivers oxygen and nutrients everywhere, but the balancing of those two, the accelerator and the gas, doesn't happen. For whatever reason, it malfunctions. And so that's where athletes can feel feelings of confusion or panic or anxiety or other levels of arousal. Some of them will also just experience them just like this on the start line of a race in low doses, right? So when you tell them, it's kind of like at the start line, you know how you feel? Only today, I noticed you were looking really edgy or really, really anxious and you couldn't sleep. And you describe sort of similar feelings so that they can understand that anxiety plays a role both in their identity as an athlete in order to help them perform. But it also might show up when they're worried about other things, or to do with school, or to do with the fact that they can't do their sport. So sometimes explaining to them, and so they can understand how their body functions, how their mind and their spirit and their body are connected, is a good way for making them feel a bit more in control of the situation. Even if it feels out of control, there is help out there, and there is a way for us to get support for every person for what they need. Some ways that we can help to prevent scenarios going from that regular everyday anxiety. Some forms of anxiety are preventable and are manageable just by self-care and these strategies on here. So I've got a few on this slide. Obviously, maintaining sleep as best we can. Things like nutrition, regular exercise, teaching and learning relaxation skills. A really important one there in the middle, cultural and spiritual practices to help them connect with the greater self, the greater world. Connection with others. So in addition to nature, other human beings, people that are important to them. And these days, even if we can't connect in person, over the phone, any digital way that they can possibly connect is a good thing. So building that in, they might have hobbies and interests, things that have fallen by the wayside as they've been more anxious or depressed in some cases, frustrated. So maybe it's time to take a look at some of those hobbies and interests that they haven't had the opportunity to do in the past because they were so involved with sport or they were so involved with travel and all these things. Well, now that those things aren't happening, what about if we looked back at some of those hobbies and interests, and some of them might be some of their cultural practices, for example, that we have the opportunity to go back to? Is there someone in community that they can learn from and that we can connect with them on? And then the last one, the one when you're feeling so frustrated and feeling like you may be managing issues with anxiety, it is really easy to see youth get frustrated and to turn in on themselves. So I'm getting a lot of coaches telling me, I'm noticing how my athletes' language about themselves is becoming very negative. Not just about themselves, but with others, but particularly looking at themselves. Why can't I figure this out? Why can't I just feel better? Why can't I just getting frustrated about some of these daily feelings that are foreign to them and not really knowing where it's coming from. So teaching them a language of self-kindness, that we are all in surge protection overload right now. Even we, the elders, the older generation, we are having issues too. And we will get through this together. And being kind and patient with ourselves is an important thing to think about. And this is this hard thing for youth to do, because they're go, and they're growing, and they've got a lot of goals that they've set. And some of those goals couldn't be met this year. So being kind and introducing this concept of self-kindness is really important right now. Some of the reasons that athletes may not, or our youth may not be coming to us and sharing some of these anxious feelings or what's going on with them, is because they might be worried. Some will tell me when I have them in a trusting setting, it's like, I didn't want my coach to know how I was feeling, because I used to be, their go-to basketball player. Like I was the team leader, and I don't know if that's going to jeopardize the way they view me on the team. If I'm somehow, my position or my status will be affected by letting them know that I'm struggling right now. If we as leaders and parents and coaches change the language from mentally tough to flexible, we will change some of the sport culture that we have created. And we will create, hopefully, I hope we will emerge from the pandemic as a kinder sport community. This is my wish. And I'm already seeing signs of it. So that excites me to see so many coaches changing their language, which is amazing. Maybe they've previously had bad experience. They've tried to seek support before at school or through someone else, and it was not positive. And maybe that's why they haven't shared. They're worried about people looking at them differently. Maybe the way that some of the folks that they look up to talk about it as being weakness. So just getting us to think about the language that we use, and that language might actually be a barrier to getting our youth to talk about and share what they're feeling. Ways that coaches and parents and leaders in our community can support. Some can also create a mental health action plan is one thing I was working on with some of the sports over the past couple of months, who have been seeing some really challenging things on their teams. Some of the athletes either conflict with one another, some incidents of self-harm, sharing some really difficult and challenging mental health issues with those coaches, and the coaches were, well, I don't know what to do. I've never built a plan for what to do if youth comes to me and has this type of a problem before. We had never faced it before. So creating a plan, and I'll talk a little bit later about what that plan might look like. Also having mental health resources. So maybe you have a website, maybe you have a WhatsApp group, maybe you have a Team Snap or some type of team website that they use, or like a Facebook group, whatever that looks like. Just having some resources on there. There's some really cool websites like jack.org is one. It's created by youth for youth to talk about mental health stuff, to make them realize they're not alone. There's lots of other youth that they can talk to about it. There's Kids Help Phone has a texting service where they don't have to call necessarily. They can text. If texting is easier for them to get their feelings out, they can text. So looking up some of those resources, and I can give a list of those to SPARC to send to all of you after this, to make sure that our youth know about them and that they can use them, because many of them are more comfortable communicating that way. Normalizing talking about mental health, leading by example, telling them, Alex is always so wonderfully giving and generous in his sharing of stories of what he has been through. So being open, modeling off of him, of being transparent about the importance of our well-being and what things we use to be connected and whole, and what practices we do in order to do that self-care. Learning how each of your athletes respond to stress, what signs are different for each of them. So even if you've got kids at home and you've got 2 or 3 kids and they're all really different. So just noticing and making note of the differences between them and when they've maybe met their max. And then even knowing your limit. So it's like, you know what, I've tried everything I know how. I have given all the resources that I know of, and I think I might need more help. So that's when we know that we might need to get them some external help as well. There are some other specific tools. There are tools out there for children, so sort of age 0 to 11, and then sort of from 12, 13 teen years and up, there's some great resources on anxiety, actually, to help them better understand the role that it plays in their life, why it might be important, what it might look like. So there's different mental health plan elements that you can build in as a family or as a team, as a program, as a community. So I've already talked about having the check-ins, and that could be just like every day. Maybe it's the thing in the morning right after breakfast, or right after we get up and we go and we feed the dog and we talk about the check-in of how the sleep was and the kind of day we're going to have. Reducing stigma, meaning just reducing a barrier to them talking. So offering a story ourselves, having things available for them to see that there is help, building trust, whatever that looks like, because all of you have different relationships with your youth. So thinking about building those trusting relationships. What are some tools in community that they can access that they haven't, that they've maybe shut themselves off from? Where could we get some additional help? And just keep on connecting. So keep on connecting through and building those connections. What could those look like? One thing that came through very strongly in the past recent months, I know some of our leaders have felt anxious. Some of our leaders have felt like they are on the border of burnout as well. So even they, the leaders, the coaches, the parents, the community leaders, need to move away from thinking that they can handle it all to really, I'm going to ask for help. And so it could start with us as well. For those of us that are watching this right now, that are in a leadership role, changing the language to be, instead of I can handle it, I can handle all of it. It's like, well, no, to be a really resilient family and community, I know that I'm going to work it through with the help of other people. And so changing the language so that you see that we don't have to do it all alone is a really important skill and tool to give them from a young age. And I feel we've gone away from that, not just in sport, but in society. Was talking just before we started up the webinar with Alex and Elisa and everyone, just saying how we didn't appreciate, many of us, just how important that connection was, and sharing the load was so important. And now more than ever, we know. So what do we, if we have identified that we have some do we have any questions on that? Any questions thus far about any of the tools? Or as you're thinking through, if you want to put them in the chat box, if there's something that wasn't clear or I went through too quickly, or you'd like me to clarify a bit more, please just put it at any time in the chat box, and then I will take a look before we wrap up today, or if we don't get time to get to all of them, depending how many we have, I'll make sure that I get those resources to Elisa and the team at SPARC so that we will be able to answer your question. So you might have a youth, and there might be youth right now watching who are really feeling like, you know what, I do have a lot of anxiety right now. I do have some stuff going on that I've been holding inside. Or we're seeing it in a friend, right? It's maybe a teammate, a classmate, someone in our family. So what are the things that we can do for others? What we want to for sure do or avoid doing is shaming them and minimizing it, like saying things like, get over it, or just, why don't you just relax, chill out. Well, they probably would if they could, right? They probably would have gotten over it or chilled out if they could have. Nobody wants to feel anxious and stressed out and frustrated. So minimizing or shaming them is not really the best approach if we want to help someone we love or care about. Instead, let's ask them. Maybe they know. Sometimes they might know some things that could be done to alleviate it. And maybe just talking about it is one way to start. We also want to try to be patient, because if it's an episodic anxiety that's really peaking, and we're there to watch it and see it, sometimes it has to ride its way out. Like I mentioned earlier, it's like a wave, and we need to let them ride that wave, but be beside them, be there present in their life, thinking, well, you can't get rid of me. I'm here, but I'm going to let you ride the wave. Just let them know that you're there to support and to love them unconditionally. But supporting the idea of getting outside help, if you've tried some of the things in-house, in family, in community, and it's not seeming to connect, and this youth is still struggling, let's think about encouraging them in any way that we can to get some additional support. And then what do we do if that athlete does open up? So they open up to us, they explain how they are feeling, or they blurt it out, maybe on a Zoom call or in a phone call, or they text you something, or they just say it in at home. And it's something that you've been suspecting, but you've never really had them say it out loud before. First thing we might want to do is to really listen, and then make sure that we really heard them, of what the details of how they're feeling. So a good way to do that is paraphrasing, which simply is phrasing it in other words, so that we know for sure that we, and repeating it back to them to show, okay, so here's what I think you said to me. This is what I interpreted. Is this how you're feeling? And say it back to them, just to make sure that you got exactly what they're feeling. Ensure them, or reassure them, that the struggles affect everyone, and we're in this together, but not minimizing what they're going through, but just normalizing what they're going through. Making sure you ask the questions to know the full extent of what they're feeling, if they're able to tell you. And sometimes if they're really young, they might get stuck on their words. All they know is that they feel a lot. So help them with the language, give them the battery analogy, talk about the battery and the different feelings at the full battery and when the battery's empty, and some different types of language, because especially when kids are young, we start even with toddlers, really, really small ones, in managing stress in small preschooler children. Even they can be taught basic language about sort of understanding where they are on that continuum. And then making sure that we have figured out where we suspect it might be on that continuum. So is it in the green or yellow zone, or is it over towards the red, the orange or the red? Should we bring this to community leaders, elders, helpers we trust? Are there supports that we haven't looked into yet that can help support this athlete or youth? And what are those? So that's when I was talking about that mental health plan that we can build in our programs or in our home, making sure we have those resources or that list somewhere, so that we have it handy and that everybody knows where it is and everybody knows what it is. So we can share that. You don't have to wait for a problem to happen. We can build it before we have problems too. Or when we're in a smooth sailing zone and we're waiting for the next storm to come, because a storm will come, because we're humans and storms will happen. I also went over in the past one coping skill or thing to investigate, and you can find this image on, I think I actually gave a worksheet with this one to SPARC as well, introducing this wise mind approach, where you're just getting youth to recognize It's okay to feel emotions. I feel it really, really strongly. It's okay to have thoughts that are really logical and approaching things rationally. But we know that most things in life require us to use both. So they require us to take a step back sometimes and think about what the consequences might be, or the rational side of the situation, and also to tap into how we feel. So giving them a language and some tools to practice finding that wise mind, that's part of growing up. That's part of athletes maturing. These are part of the life skills that we teach as coaches and as leaders in our communities. So sometimes having this as a visual to explain, especially in those teen years when they spend a lot of time in emotion mind due to hormones and all kinds of changes that are going on in their bodies and their brains. This gives them a language. It gives them a visual where they can feel like, okay, I'm not totally losing it here. I am going through a common humanity, and this is a technique that I can use to help them understand that growth. We might also want to adjust expectations at this time where we are in history. Some things to your youth might have been really important in the past, and maybe they're not even as important now. Or opposite, things that were never important before suddenly are so important to them because so many things that we're doing have been flipped upside down. So one other language adjustment that you might want to do, in addition to talking about flexibility instead of toughness, is using for now language. And this is what I've been trying to use a lot in our sports center and in schools when I'm working with teachers, working with parents and families, is for now. So a sense of hope. We're doing something, and yes, we're going to do this for now, but knowing that this will change. Things will come, change will come, things will open up again. It's hard to be patient right now, but adjusting expectations and letting them know that we're here to help them ride through while things are having to be adjusted. Using for now language really helps. It even helps with the really young ones who are very impatient because they are so young, but adjusting those expectations. Another tool from last month's webinar, if you missed it, you can go on and to see in the recorded version and see a much longer explanation of this idea of the middle path. And the middle path is simply helping deal with some of those anxieties and that stress by finding the middle ground and understanding that not everybody and not everything in life is so clear and good or bad. Hero and zero, evil and excellence, or whatever those opposites might be. In fact, we're living in a really big opportunity for being in the middle path right now. There are a lot of things that we need to do, and we don't really want to do them, but we need to do them in order to keep the people that we love safe and the most vulnerable in our community. But there are also things that we want to do, and it's okay to want those and also know that we have to do some other things too. It's okay to feel that tension in the middle. It's okay. So to normalize that for youth can also help reduce and dissipate some of that anxiety. Oh, so it's normal that I'm feeling this way. Well, of course it's normal. We're all feeling this way. And so that can help. And that it's okay too to work on their coping skills and relying on themselves. We want them to do that. We want them to take responsibility. We want them to build those life skills to be strong future leaders and members of our community. But we also want them to know that it's okay to ask for help. So those two things don't have to be mutually exclusive and not happening at the same time. We can absolutely be in the middle path where we're doing both. So some of these concepts can be introduced, and they on their own can help with understanding some of the world of anxiety that they might be feeling inside. Another concept to introduce to them, and I mentioned this earlier too in the chart talking about coping strategies, is like kindness to self or self-compassion. And we need to show that too, as parents and as coaches and leaders. We have to model that self-compassion, being patient with ourselves, taking a break, talking to ourselves as though we would a friend, encouraging them to do the same. So introducing this concept of self-compassion can be a really great tool, and starting as young as little, like the teeny weeny ones that I've worked with, I call it best friend talk. When they're talking to themselves and they're talking with an angry voice, or they're talking in a really negative way about themselves, we try to turn it around to make them understand what best friend talk would look like. So how would you talk to your best buddy over there, or your little sister? How would your auntie talk to you? What would the language be of being kind? And so getting them to talk that way to themselves. And that too can reduce some of the frustration as we reduce some of that, that tension. And then another idea, some athletes and teams have actually started to develop these, and using toolkits that they might look at a daily basis, or maybe in the week, have sort of flexible plans that give that athlete or that youth member things that they can focus on, that they are in charge of. So can't be in charge of our schedules. There's so many things out of our control, but there might be things that they can do in order to honor their mind, their body, their emotions, their spirit, school, and sport. And maybe not all of them in the same day. Maybe it's going to look different for some of them. There's going to be more of a priority because one area is particularly challenging right now than another. But giving, and you could personalize this for them. You could make a chart that you could put on the wall of their room, or you can have a virtual chart that you can give out to your team. Or you could have this, we have one, it's a community center. They also have on the top, they have giving is another. So say we would put, I guess, on that same blue zone up there, we would say, helping others is up in the top of the blue zone in what we're going to honor today. So, and they check off as many as they feel they're capable of that day or that week. And then they might have certain coping strategies for today that they're really going to dig into to help wherever they are in the battery and wherever they are in the stoplight. And then talking through the things that are helpful that they can do, whether it's at home, if you're a parent around the house, what are things that they can do at home? And what are the things that are harmful that we know end up hurting them or others that we're trying to minimize? And who is that one special person, that go-to that everybody has right there? Who's that person? And there might be more than one. So just another activity, doesn't have to look exactly like this, just giving you some ideas of some different tools that different families and teams and communities have used to help with the anxiety that the youth are feeling, giving them something they can be in charge of, something they can build for themselves so they can be part of the solution. Instead of always having to take direction from all of the adults, let them be part of that. Let them help you build it. And we find the most success when they are part of the architecture of that and help design that. And then just wanted to, these last two tools, I've already given these worksheets out to iSpark as well. So I think Elisa still has, I hope you still have them, Elisa. I can always resend if they're not still in the inventory of iSpark's tools that they have, but in the past, when some of in the fall, I believe, so it would have been September or October, sent out some of these tools as well, just to help the youth identify what they're feeling, where they're feeling it, and some of the strategies, tracking some of those strategies that they can do to help them manage things a little bit better, what you can do as a team or a community or a family to help them cope too. So just a couple tools that are just virtual, and you can make them your own. You can add whatever details you'd like to make them suit your family or your sport, and making sure that we send those out. So and those are out. I'm not sure if we're going to do a follow-up email or how we would distribute those, but I think in the past we've sent them out to those who signed up for the workshop. And I'm wondering if anyone has any questions. So if there was anything that I didn't describe clearly, or if there's something that a tool you want to know a little bit more about, or maybe I did just such a fantastic job that it's all really clear. Or maybe there's a particular youth that you're thinking of that you need some support for, or you didn't see a tool that exactly fit the scenario, or you're not sure where else to get resources. You can send me a note, or send me a note through iSpark. It's totally up to everyone. I'll make sure that they get a hold of me, and I'd really love to be able to support you however I can with getting you those resources as well. So I don't see any additional questions. So hopefully I didn't confuse everyone too badly tonight. It's either a sign I was very clear, or it's a sign everyone's asleep, but I hope not. And I hope that you found some of these tools useful, and that they can be convertible and be applied to whatever your youth are dealing with right now. Is there anything, Elisa, that we should let them know about follow-up and how we can get them those tools? I'm not sure what to.
Yeah, Shaunna. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much. And thanks again, Shaunna, for such a great presentation. Yes. So as always, we send a link to those who are interested. I can already see that my inbox is actually, I've received many emails from you guys asking, A, for the resources that Shaunna had talked about, B, the recording, and even the stress tracker, if we could send that to you. So I'll loop back and I'll connect with Shaunna. And I can see that a couple of questions are coming in, Shaunna, if you wanted to address those before we wrap up.
Okay, sure. Let me look. Struggling with even having fun with sport. Oh yes, this is another thing that we've been facing a lot too, because the version of sport that we're doing right now is not the version that they were planning. And sport is just such a small part of all these other big stressors. So, place to begin, I guess, would be talking about what's underlying that. So we'd have to find out whether it's the type of sport or some of the restrictions that we have on it, or if it's because so many of those other mental health markers or other restrictions are affecting their overall, we call it the joy factor. So it's hard to say right off the top of what that might be for some of your athletes, but I guess that's step one, is talking about it. Step one is figuring out what they think is causing it. And Charlie here's making a good one. So struggling with restrictions and they're having a hard time finding the normal. Yeah, exactly. That's a great way of putting it. Just really trying to figure out how we can keep that heart stoked when they're doing skills and drills, and they're really like Chelsea's saying in here, they're getting fed up of it. They want to travel again. They want to go to tournaments. They want competition. They want, the full smorgasbord usually that sport provides. So one team did sort of a, every month they have this, connecting with their heart, the heart of sport, they called it. What's the heart of sport? And so to rejuvenate the heart of sport, they had them say what it is they are most excited about getting back in sport. And the heart in sport, using the for now language. I know that's hard because we've been doing for now for a year now and they're fed up of it. But sometimes reducing that tension by just knowing that the hope is there, it will come. What's the heart that we're going to get back to? What are we most looking forward to? What small elements can we take from today? And so they had some silly ones like MVP. Okay, because I used to get the MVP, we used to always try to go for the special teams and making the MVP. So they decided, well, I guess we'll do our own internal MVP then. Well, how do you win it? What do you do? So they had to change the criteria. So they took some of the things from the heart of sport that they missed and they converted them for the now. So they had, it's kind of a second best. It's not really what we want, but it's like, you know what? We're going to do our MVP, a monthly MVP. And we're going to catch each other just being awesome in dealing with things and the little things. So they totally changed their criteria, but that's just one way. And that was the kids that came up with that, not the coaches. So you might be surprised maybe if you put that challenge out there to your athletes. And one last question here too. So is it regular for teams to be more aggressive? My team's been getting into fight. Absolute. In fact, I was going to mention that earlier. So we're noticing aggressive behavior, frustration behavior, and bullying behavior are all up. I wish we'd had this session at the beginning of hockey. Oh, I know. Yeah, no, me too. Yeah, just seeing a lot of the frustrations coming out. It's coming out in so many different ways, and bullying behaviors we're seeing as well. So I've had to do a lot of bullying mediation and coming up with building a kindness protocol of a return to kindness and new codes of conduct again. And but that's been you're not alone. Let's put it that way. Maybe we'll have to do that in our next session, Elisa. That's an idea.
It sounds like it, Shaunna. These are great questions, everyone. I will make a note. We haven't formally announced this, as I have been working on the documents with our communications team. Very excited to announce that next week and over the next week and a half, SPARC will be having a series of live events. One of the events is actually going to be Bridget Laquette, who is the first Indigenous female hockey athlete appointed to Team Canada and to win a silver medalist with Canada at the Olympics. But not only that, we're going to be having some, contests and stuff like that. So anyone that's on this webinar now, we will also send you all of those details just to keep the momentum live. And it was actually Shaunna, Michelle Webster, and I that we were talking about, oh my goodness, I cannot believe we've reached 1 year with COVID, and what can we do for the athletes? And so we have prepared a week and a half worth of events for the athletes. And some of it is also including breath and embodiment, ancestral yoga, whether you're doing it with a chair. So a lot of great questions here, Shaunna, and it looks like we might just have to plan another webinar.
I think so. Yeah, I'm definitely going to take some of these last comments in the chat box. They could make a really great follow-up session. So thank you so much for everyone who brought all the great, thank you for sharing what you've been going through. And thank you for coaching and leading and parenting and managing your communities. And just thank you to everybody.
Awesome. Well, thank you. Alec, did you have any closing words that you wanted to share?
Yes, thank you, Lisa. Shaunna, you're awesome. You are awesome. And I guess when we go into the sauna, we know it's a cleansing ceremony that we're going into. Did you get that?
I like it.
Anyway, yeah, I've got a calendar that has some sayings in there, and one of which right now is in December, dreams. The future belongs to those who believe in the beauty of their dreams. And of course, we dream of the days when we call it normalized. However, Auntie Bonnie says, be kind, be safe, be calm, and I say because. So take care, everybody. Look after yourselves, of course, and we'll see you again. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Alec, Masai, everyone for attending. And of course, I will be sending all the details that we had talked about shortly after in the next following days. Thank you.
Thank you.
Wait,